Today I'm going to try to solve one of Midjourney's biggest mysteries. Many of you have asked me whether it's possible to place multiple consistent characters within the same scene in Midjourney, and I must confess I was not sure whether it was possible. Placing multiple characters in the same scene is one thing, but making sure they remain consistent is a whole nother story. Naturally, I had to find out whether it could be done. And just so you know, I'm not promising you anything, but if you're curious to find out what fascinating things I learned, then make sure you come along for the entire ride. Trust me, you will not regret it. So today I'm going to try to place 2 or more consistent characters in a scene. I'm going to use nothing but Midjourney and an image editor such as Photoshop or Affinity Designer. And I'm only going to use the image editor in order to prepare reference images. I will not use it to create the final image. So let's start off with attempt number 1. So for this first exercise, I'm going to use our good old friends Carla Caruso and Peggy Palermo. I will try to place Carla and Peggy in the middle of a New York City street, and I also want them to be raising their arms in a fist as if they were protesting. I'm going to start off by recovering the original reference image that I created for Carla Caruso in part 3 of this series. Imagine glamour shot, full body image, beautiful woman, bright red braided bun hair, only red hair, wearing a leather jacket in gray color, wearing a white tank top under jacket, wearing beige pants on legs, in the style of a Marvel comic book, an aspect ratio of 2:3. And if you have a real quick look, this was one of the original character concepts that we used in order to blend it into something entirely new. Then I'm going to create a similar type of full body character concept for Peggy Palermo as well. Imagine glamour shot, full body image on white background, beautiful woman, bob cut, pink hair, blue eyes, black leather clothing, black pants on legs, and black boots, in the style of a Marvel comic book, aspect ratio of 2:3. So now that we have our source character concepts, let's create new images of Carla and Peggy in their protesting pose. I'll start off by doing this for Carla. Imagine, and then we start off with the reference image that we just created. Beautiful woman, bright red hair, braided bun hairstyle, only red hair, Marvel comic book style, and then holding a fist in the air, raising her arm in a fist. Let's quickly check out what that looks like. And these look pretty good. So now let's do the exact same thing for Peggy. Imagine, and we use Peggy's reference image, beautiful woman, bob cut, pink hair, black leather clothing in the style of a comic book, holding a fist in the air, raising her arm in a fist. Okay, perfect. These look really good. So now that we have our character references, let's create some background scenery. I'm going to create a scenery that is in New York City and that is showing us a street. Imagine panoramic view of a long street in New York City, dystopian theme, Marvel comic book style, and again, an aspect ratio of 3:2. Okay, excellent. So these are just what I need. So next, I'm going to create 3 different image references inside my image editor. In each one of them, I'll use a different background image from this set of 4, and I'll also place different versions of the characters on top of these. In order to do this, I had to remove all of the white background of the character references and then place them on top of these background images. And I'm hoping that these reference images will be dominant enough for Midjourney to understand exactly what I want. So let's try blending all 3 of these image references into one image. Imagine, followed by 3 image prompts and 1 URL for each one of the references. Yikes. So these are just absolutely hideous. Okay, so maybe I do need to add a text prompt after all. Let me add some more context and see whether that works. Imagine, and then we start off with our 3 image prompts, and then followed by a text prompt that addresses our 2 different characters. All right, so let's have a look at our images. Okay, so clearly something is not working here. But what exactly went wrong? Well, it seems that the image references are able to convey the correct composition, but Midjourney can't assign the correct hair to each character. It also can't really assign the correct outfit, and the faces are just plain ugly. So this attempt clearly was a complete failure. But maybe these characters are just too complex for this sort of thing. I recently saw another YouTuber presenting his approach for creating consistent characters, and he kept using very simple, cute, and small characters. Maybe it just works better with those. However, he was just creating character concepts, and he was not actually trying to place them within a particular scene. Either way, let's at least give it a try. Moving on to attempt number 2. So let's start off by creating 2 different character concepts. First, I'm going to create a cute little mouse wearing an ascot cap. Imagine character concept on white background, multiple poses and expressions, little white mouse character wearing a brown ascot cap, children's book illustration in an aspect ratio of 3:2. So from this set of 4, I really like the bottom left one, so let's go with that one. And my second character is going to be a cute little bear wearing a red shirt. Imagine character concept on white background, multiple poses and expressions, little brown bear character wearing a red shirt, children's book illustration. So from these, the bottom right one is absolutely perfect for this use case, so let's keep that set. Next, we need some background scenery for our characters as well. So let's create an image of a children's room. Imagine ground level shot of a children's room, children's book illustration style. Great, so from these, let's pick the bottom right one. And then once again, I bring everything back into an image editor, I cut out my characters, and then I place them on top of the background that we just generated. And if it wasn't for the slightly different drawing style, you could almost use this image as an actual illustration in a book. Now you might be tempted to simply blend together the background image and the image reference that we just created. And rest assured, it will create an image that has a consistent style. However, it will also, once again, mess up our characters. So instead, let's try blending our reference image with a text prompt. Imagine, and then we start with our reference image, and then followed by ground level shot of a children's room, little brown bear character wearing a red shirt, little white mouse wearing a brown ascot cap, a bear and a mouse having a conversation, children's book illustration style in an aspect ratio of 3:2. So this creates a set of images that do resemble the concept that we had in mind, and the characters do actually look pretty good. However, they are not the characters that we actually wanted, and their features are all over the place. So what does this tell us? Well, simpler characters are a bit easier to create. Placing 2 or more in the same scene is still very difficult. Midjourney isn't able to assign the correct features to specific characters, and you mostly get mashups of your ideas. Okay, so as much as it pains me to say this, I don't think that image references are going to get us very far in this setup. As soon as you want to use more than one specific character in a scene, the lines start to blur and concepts invariably start to bleed into each other much more than you actually want them to. So this attempt was also a complete failure. So now it's time to move on to multi-prompts and give those a try. But before we do that, I'd just like to note something. As frustrating as all of this might seem, this is exactly what prompting is all about. We try to push the limits, and in a collective effort, we find out what actually works and what doesn't. If you enjoy tinkering and experimenting with other people, then come join us in the official Tokenized AI Discord. It's a great place to share insights, help each other, or just hang out. Anyway, so let's move on. Here goes attempt number 3. Multi-prompts have the major advantage of allowing us to reinforce certain concepts from different points of view. So that's why I'm actually quite hopeful that this might work. However, I also know that they do have a similar bleeding problem when it comes to using multiple characters of the same category. This is particularly obvious when you try to place 2 different animals next to each other. Just have a look at this. Imagine a brown bear sitting next to a sloth. Okay, so if you look at this image, I think it's pretty obvious what the problem is here. Midjourney keeps creating weird fantasy creatures that are a blend of both animals. I also have absolutely no clue what these strange bird-like creatures are doing in the image. However, things are considerably easier when you try to place 2 completely unrelated character types next to each other. And by unrelated, I mean animals and humans. So let's start off with something relatively simple. Imagine cute brown bear speaking to a little boy. So as you can see, this concept is crystal clear to Midjourney. But let's add some details. I'm going to add some color to the boy's clothes. Imagine cute brown bear speaking to a little boy wearing blue clothes. Okay, so this works great, but so far this is only a single prompt. So let's add a second segment in order to reinforce the concept. Imagine cute brown bear speaking to a little boy wearing blue clothes, and that's the end of our first segment, and then a conversation between a little boy in a blue outfit and a cute brown bear. So as you can see, whenever you add color to your prompt, there is usually going to be some form of color bleed. Sometimes you can actually fix this by simply adding a negative prompt like this. Imagine followed by the entire prompt that you had before, except that we're going to add a third segment, which is a negative prompt for blue background. Now, while this isn't perfect and it sometimes removes more color than you actually want to, it's still quite useful to know how this works. So let's change the location of the characters and place them on a farm. Imagine cute brown bear speaking to a little boy wearing blue clothes, country farm in the background, and that's our first segment. And then a conversation between a little boy in a blue outfit and a cute brown bear, background scenery of a farm, and that's our second segment. So let me ask you a question. Do you notice the obvious problem in these images? Picking a farm was probably the dumbest thing I could do. What do you usually find on a farm? That's right, a ton of different animals. And that's why our bear looks like he's transformed into a pig-like or cow-like animal in the bottom two images. Once again, Midjourney fails completely at keeping two characters of the same category apart. So clearly we need to move this to an entirely different location. Imagine cute brown bear speaking to a little boy wearing blue clothes, garden in background. That ends our first segment, and then conversation between a little boy in a blue outfit and a cute brown bear, background scenery of a garden. Alright, so this is much better already. Now let's inject some children's book illustration style into the prompt by adding it only to the first segment. Imagine, and then we repeat the entire prompt from before, except that we've added children's book illustration to the first segment. And here's what that'll look like. If you wanted an even stronger children's illustration style, you would simply add it to the second segment as well. So let's do that. Imagine we add children's book illustration at the very end of the second segment as well. And here it is. Sometimes the increased abstraction of a children's book illustration can be quite helpful. So I'm going to try something on a whim. I really like the top left and the bottom left styles, so I'm going to try to apply these to a slightly different prompt. Let's start off by creating a new prompt without the image references. Imagine cute brown bear and a little boy sitting on a bench, little boy wearing blue clothes, garden in background, children's book illustration. That ends our first segment. And then little boy in a blue outfit and a cute brown bear sitting on a bench, background scenery of a garden, children's book illustration, and that ends our second segment. Now, you might really like the style of the images that you see here, but please just ignore these for a moment. The only thing that we're trying to do right now is to see whether our text prompt actually gives us the sort of concept that we were aiming for. And clearly, in this case, it does. So now let's try that very same prompt, but add one of our image references at the very beginning of the prompt. Imagine, and then we add our image reference as an image prompt, followed by the same text prompt that we used before. Okay, so this is actually something we can potentially work with. Let's try the exact same thing, but with the other image reference as well. Imagine, and then we use the exact same prompt, except that we've replaced the first image prompt with the second reference image. And we've also added a third segment, which is a negative prompt to remove blue objects. This is supposed to prevent the bench from becoming blue in the image. Now, I don't know about you, but I think these images are absolutely awesome. So I think it's actually fair to say that this attempt was at least a partial success. It's crucial that you do not get too hung up about the minute details in these images. Ignore the micro, focus on the macro. If you plan on using this for a children's book, let's be honest here. The vast majority of the people out there are not going to notice these tiny differences as long as you get the basics right. So what have we learned here? Avoid placing more than one animal in your scene. One animal and a human is fine. Avoid color bleed by fine-tuning with negative prompts. Focus on getting the initial text prompt right, then apply styles with image references, and tweak your text prompt to change the composition and dynamic. So what about 3 characters? Is that something we can do as well? Well, let's give it a try. This is attempt number 4. I'm going to skip the simple prompts and jump straight to a very complex prompt using 3 different segments. Imagine image of a garden, a little boy and girl with blonde hair having a conversation with a white rabbit, garden in the background. That ends our first segment. Then garden scenery, girl and boy speaking to a little white rabbit. That ends our second segment. And then a little white rabbit speaking to 2 children in a park. And that ends our third segment. Okay, so these actually look pretty good already. We have an animal, a female character, and a male character. I'm going to avoid adding color to the prompt simply because I know that it's going to result in color bleed, which I would like to avoid right now. I'm also going to avoid adding any additional details to the characters because I know that it's going to lead to somewhat strange results. For example, if I were to introduce the concept of a dress, then the boy is much more likely to have feminine traits or look like a girl altogether. Instead, I'm just going to add children's book illustration to the end of every segment of this prompt. So we repeat the entirety of the previous prompt, except that we've added children's book illustration on the first, second, and third segment. Okay, so these actually look really nice. I'm going to pick the bottom right image as an image reference. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to apply the same logic that we used in our third attempt. I'm going to start off by changing the prompt just a little bit. Imagine, and then we repeat most of the prompt again, except that what we've done is that we've changed the location by adding a pool. And if we look at the images it gives us, it's not entirely perfect, but to be honest, this is more than good enough for what we're trying to do. So let's see what happens when we use this new prompt and add the image reference that we selected before. Imagine, and then we add the image reference followed by our new prompt that contains the information with the pool. And boom. Now that, I believe, qualifies as a success. Now I do realize that the clothes are changing slightly in these different images. However, you also know that you can re-roll these images, these prompts, as many times as you like until you do get the right combination, and we know that this works. But I actually want to go one step further. I wanted to see whether I could keep the style and the composition, but change the color of the character's clothes. So I took the original image reference that we used, as well as one of the new images, and I applied strong colors to their clothes. I then used both of these images as references, and simply repeat the rest of the prompt. Imagine, and then we start off with our two image references, and then image of a garden pool, a little boy and girl with long blonde hair sitting next to a pool with a white rabbit, garden with pool in the background, children's book illustration. Garden scenery with a pool, girl and boy speaking to a little white rabbit sitting next to a pool, children's book illustration. A little white rabbit speaking to two children in a park with a pool, children's book illustration. And here's what I got. Now there's something very interesting going on here. The boy's clothes still aren't very consistent, and they keep changing in every single one of these images. However, I successfully managed to change the color of the girl's dress in not just one, but all four of these images. How awesome is that? So looking back at all of our attempts, what have we learned today? Midjourney has difficulty assigning many specific details to different characters. This includes facial features, clothes, and especially color. Color bleed is a recurring problem. Animals do not mix well with animals. Humans of the same gender also confuse Midjourney. Humans of different genders can work quite well. In other words, multiple characters require strict archetypical contrast. Image references can be helpful for style, but only if your core text prompt already works on a standalone basis. Simple characters are easier because abstraction tricks our brain into believing that they look similar. This has been the most challenging problem that I've been faced with so far. And I'm not going to lie, it took me a full 3 days of pulling my hair out just to get to the point where I am now. But guess what? I now know how it's done, and so do you. This was part 4 of my character design series, and once part 5 is released, you'll find it right here in the corner of the screen. If you missed the last episode, go catch up on that content by watching part 3 right here. And if you're new to the channel, go check out the entire character design playlist right here. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a comment, keep on learning, and take care.